Hi, my name is Kimberly Sweetwood, and I'm happy to be here tonight. So, and thank you for your patience ahead of time because my computer system completely died on me a couple of days ago, and I've had a devil of a time retrieving not only my school stuff but my business data. So, I'm still don't have it figured out, hence I'm doing this on my cell phone, but I figured I'd get this in as best I could. Um, so my idea of Western civilization and why it's still relevant is because it's unique as the first to promote dignity of all and every individual, regardless of their station at birth. Now, according to Bradley Bierzer, um, Western civilization is encompassed in beliefs and traditions of the ancient world, specifically ancient Greece and Christianity. Yet the actual term, the West, which later developed into Western civilization, was first coined very recently, actually, comparatively speaking, in 1907 by Chesterton, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, and was written about by Robert Royal, because the term was quote unquote Western man meaning, people. Royal goes on to say that the West was just simply a geographical reference to Western countries of European origin that later um, adapted and adjusted their cultural base, usually against the European influence. Um, the foundations of Western civilization that are the principles of classical Greek philosophies, and like Aristotle and Socrates and Christianity, it's amazing how they've carried through over time. That's really impressive. That's some very strong foundational principles. And they're still with us today. But the question is, do we recognize them? Do we understand them? And do we honor them by following them? Bierzer uses the Spartans at Thermopylae as an example of the earliest coalescence and demonstration of what would later become Western civilization and Western ideals. The Spartans' legacy was of sacrifice, justice, and resistance against submitting to Xerxes. At the same time they were fighting against Xerxes, they were also fighting for freedom and liberty. And I think that is important to note, as freedom means something different today than it did back then. Freedom today is the idea that you can do what you need or want without hurting anyone else. Now, the key part is not hurting anyone else, because that requires a value judgment to know whether what you're doing is right or wrong, which leads into the idea of virtue. Okay, so the modern project that Alexander Rosenthal Pubel talks about is the idea of individual liberty in religious, political, cultural, and economic spheres, and that's at the heart of the modern world. As a part of this modern project, Alexander also introduces us to Isaiah Berlin, who sets up the idea of negative freedom. Negative freedom is morally neutral, but it can be used for good or bad. So his example is in the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech. You can use it for good or you can use it for bad, depending on your personal virtue. Virtue, I believe, is the linchpin and control over an individual's freedom. Um, Rosenthal Pubel analyzes classical Greek philosophy and illustrates how it's centered around the idea of self-mastery. Not the ability to do what you want, but the rational self-governance to act according to one's judgment of what is right and what is just. And in society, there must be a basic tenet of laws that are agreed to and followed by all for a cohesive continuity. And those laws determine how free you're going to be or not based on your own virtues. So if you do something that's virtuous and you're not breaking the law, you're not going to get in trouble and nobody's going to come down on you. If you do something that's not virtuous and you do something wrong, then you're going to have to pay the price for that. There's consequences. Now, the relevance of all of this to today in Western civilization is watching the news every night. There's a distinct lack of control and self-mastery over one's actions, hence virtue. And that, I think, ebbs and flows over time and comes back around every so many years. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.